24th, 1985, and we are here at Abe's house in Atlantic City celebrating his, what birthday?
47th birthday.
40?
No.
That's okay, 47th, because if it's his 47th birthday,
His 55th
that means it's my
birthday.
45th, right?
45th. And
And
Benny's 49th.
And Florence's,
57th
my
birthday.
sister-in-law Florence's birthday, they both happen to have the birthday the same day.
It's his 57th birthday.
Okay. And we are trying to do an oral history of our family for our children so that they will remember, so they will always have something that will tell them about what our life was
And
like
give them some information that they don't have.
when we're
You should
gone.
talk to your children here. You're not talking to third parties.
Oh,
This is for the children.
okay. This is for you kids. So that when we're gone, you will know something about what our lives were like growing up. So,
Okay.
by the way,
let me-
excuse me, my brother,
ahead.
there's one brother missing, my brother Max. who
Our
is-
oldest brother.
Oh, our oldest brother Max, who's not here with us, but we'll let him add his own stories at another time.
Let me establish the difference in ages, whoever's watching, because you may not even know the difference in ages between us. I'll be 59 next month. Florence was 55.
Not true.
50.
Not true. I will never be 55.
She was 55 in May,
Never.
and he was just 57.
Okay.
And Max will be 64 next month, the one that's missing. Max, our oldest brother, will be 64. So those are the four in the family, four siblings.
We should start with whoever has the earliest memory, which is obviously would be you.
The earliest memory that I have, I was a very sickly child. I was practically born an asthmatic, and spent most of my first 10 years, or a good part of my first 10 years, hospitalized or sick.
With pneumonia. Huh?
Well, oh yeah, I was born premature, that's right. I was a premature baby. I was 4 pounds, 4 ounces when I was born. I was a 7-month baby.
I don't even know that.
Yeah, I weighed 4 pounds, 4 ounces when I was born.
7 months.
Yeah,
With an innie or an outie?
That's a
And-
big baby.
yeah. Yeah, it was big, but at that time, the facilities for premature babies were very rustic, very primitive. And I was in the hospital about 8 weeks before I came home, before they let me go home. Before I got up to about,
He does have a good memory.
no, this isn't what I remember. This is what,
I
It's
thought
okay.
I don't remember this.
It's all right. Whatever we have been told are part of the memories, too.
I was hospitalized during the first 10 years of my childhood about 24 times. Most of those times in Beth Israel Hospital on 16th Street and First Avenue. On 16th Street and First Avenue. Mostly with lung infections. About six times they were pneumonia.
And double pneumonia
And double
twice.
pneumonia.
Twice double pneumonia.
I mean, I knew all the nurses, they all knew me. And when you went in the hospital for pneumonia at that time, you stayed in there for 4 or 5 weeks at a time. There was no penicillin or anything like that. One of my earliest recollections is being sick. This is one of the most vivid recollections I have, is being sick at about age 8, where I had to be rushed to the hospital. And my brother Max, who was 5 years older than I, he would be about 13 at that time. And Max was almost 6 feet tall at the age of 13. Max is the tallest of us. We had 1 nickel for bus fare. So Max put me on the bus, because we only had a nickel. We lived on 6th Street and 2nd Avenue. And Max raced alongside the bus to 16th Street while I sat on the bus to check me into the emergency at the hospital. And I sat there running a fever, laughing, watching him run along the bus. and the bus stopped every 2 blocks to pick up passengers. So the bus would pull ahead of him, and he'd be running behind. Then the bus would come to a stop, either a red light or a bus stop, and he'd catch up. Max was a marvelous athlete, even at 13. He always was a marvelous athlete. And he'd catch up and wave to me as he ran by and get a block ahead of the bus till it picked up its passengers and picked up speed and the light changed. And he'd be running way ahead. And then the bus would catch up to him and I'd wave to him. And he made a game out of it.
You kept saying, keep breathing, Benny.
You know, and till we got to 16th Street, and then I got off the bus and he walked me into the hospital. How the hospital took me without an adult, I have no idea, but they knew me already. You know, I walked in there with the fever and the...
Well, where was Mom?
She was probably working.
Probably working in a restaurant.
You know, our mother
our
was
parents
was constantly working at, usually as a cook in one or another of the restaurants where she'd bring us home food. We go up there and get some food for lunches sometimes. Kosher restaurants usually. Or on occasion she had her own restaurants, and we became busboys and waiters there.
And waitresses.
And waitresses, yes. And yeah, right.
We're there.
My illness led to a situation that I just asked Florence about today, because at age 10...
You can call me Faggy.
Faggy. I never called her Florence in my life.
I call Florence.
I asked Faggy, at age 10, my lungs were so shot that the doctor told my mother that if I caught pneumonia one more time, I'd probably die, because my lungs were shredded. They said they were shredded.
I remember that.
I think they
And I
advised that you moved to Arizona.
Arizona,
Yes,
right.
but we had any hot climate, any hot, dry climate.
They didn't want you to spend another winter.
Another winter, because
New York.
where I could catch pneumonia once more. So we had an aunt and uncle. My mother's sister was living in Cuba at that time, and she decided to take me down there and leave me down in Havana with them, which she did. She left me down there for 2 years. She came down, stayed with me for 6 months, and left me there for 2 years, and I was completely cured. That 2 years in Cuba cured me completely. I came back at 12. I was there from age...
And you learned Spanish.
And I learned Spanish.
And you couldn't even get out of the Army on disability.
No, I was completely
because you
cured.
were so well.
That 2
after
years
that.
cured me
True.
completely. I never had any asthma after that. But the strange thing is, I asked Faggy today, I never knew where they were, Max and Faggy and Abe, during the 2 years, not during the 2 years, but during the 6 months that my mother and I were in Cuba. I mean, I was there for 2 years, but she was there for the 6 months. What did they do during those 6 months?
We'll let our brother Abe tell you what we did.
What we did, we were in a,
Kaput.
I guess it was a nursery school. Not a nursery school, it was a home.
The Hebrew Day and Night Nursery on 125th Street in Harlem. I
It
remember.
wasn't 125th Street, was it?
113th Street.
Right, 113th Street, and this was in the middle of Harlem. As a matter of fact, we went to grammar school there during those, the time that we were there, and it was more than 6 months.
No, Mom was only there 6 months.
Because I graduated grammar school.
Well, we stayed in Harlem. We lived in
Oh,
Harlem
that's
afterwards.
right, yeah.
Mom had 2 restaurants, remember, in Harlem?
Right.
We all
because
stayed
then
there.
we stayed in Harlem. We had a Mom opened up a restaurant and rooming house
A
on
restaurant,
125th
right,
Street.
right.
And as a matter of fact, Ray was telling me this morning. She says, "Guess what, Benny had for breakfast this morning? He had a meatloaf sandwich." I said, "Well, that's not unusual, because when we had the rooming house and restaurant, we lived over the restaurant." And it was not unusual for Benny to come down and have meatballs, fresh-made meatballs that were made for Fonday's meal for breakfast. And Saturday mornings he would eat chulent, which I guess you kids really don't know what chulent is, but it.
Yeah, that was what's chulent?
Okay.
Chulent is a traditional Jewish dish that was prepared for Saturday meals. You couldn't cook Friday night.
You couldn't cook Saturday.
Saturday,
Couldn't
so
cook after
you would
Friday
cook
night.
Friday, and you would let this. It would stay hot.
Well, you'd leave it on the
would,
stove.
and it would be a combination of
Cook
what,
all
barley
day.
and potatoes and meat and.
No meat. I don't think. Did it
Oh,
have
sure,
meat?
it had meat in it. Oh, sure, it had.
I don't
If
remember.
it didn't have meat,
Beans, I
if it didn't have
remember.
meat. If it didn't have meat in it, Benny wouldn't eat it.
That's right.
So
I don't think it had meat in it.
it was not unusual for Benny to eat that for breakfast.
A mess.
But delicious.
But that goes. That's
and I would eat it
further
for
on.
breakfast Saturday morning. I didn't get this way
really
without
don't
trying.
have much recollection of it.
Well, I do remember. You know, I'll tell you.
That must be Mitchell. We're going to have to interrupt this program because we have
Well,
a call from Los Angeles,
Well,
Santa Monica.
We're such a diverse family.
Stop it.
all right. I do remember being at this place, and I remember going to public school, and there were mostly all black children. We were just the children at this Jewish day and night nursery were Jewish. And on the weekend, my father took 2 rooms, I think a bedroom and a kitchen, and he would take us home for the weekend, Abe and I. I think my brother Max was in a school for bad boys, Hawthorne. And should I tell that story?
Wayward boys.
Wayward boys. What had happened is Max, I guess he was about 15 then when he went in. Sure.
We should leave this part for Max, really.
All right, I'll let.
I think we ought to let Max tell this
All
part.
right. Well, I could.
Because it'd be
tell.
more accurate, I think.
Well, I do remember how come he
Oh,
went
go
in
ahead.
there.
Good.
He was pretty wild, and he
He
was
wants
running.
to correct the...
That's right.
He can
could
always make
correct.
a
He was
correction.
running around with a very wild crowd.
Yes.
And one night, this crowd got into a lot of trouble. I don't remember what they did. Do you? They killed
I was
somebody?
in
or-
Cuba.
Or they
Yeah, I
stole
think.
something?
I was in
Well,
Cuba.
I don't know what they did at this particular time. I know that part of this crowd was eventually indicted for murder.
Yeah, they got into big trouble, and my mother was absolutely terrified. Max just happened not to be with them this night, and my mother was sure that it was just pure luck that he wasn't there, and she knew it was only a matter of time that he would get into trouble. So she went to some agency and begged for help for him. I don't, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, they placed him in this school. It was called
Hawthorne.
Hawthorne. Very fine school, and I really
Marvelous.
turned him around. He became editor of the paper, and he was encouraged to write, and I think that's
Went
where,
into an acting group.
and he started to act. That's where his interest in the theater and in journalism flourished, and turned him around pretty much, I
Became
think.
a farmer, too.
And but that's what I remember. I remember my mother taking me up to see him in the bitter cold all the time. I was her every Saturday. She'd go to visit him, and then she'd take me along. I remember how cold it used to be. A fellow used to
Long
take us.
train ride.
We used to go. It was a car. Someone took us in a
Oh,
car
I went by train.
once in a car, and my mother wanted me to wear long stockings, but I didn't think that was nice. So I wanted to wear my little anklets, and I remember I nearly froze to death because the car had no heat, and it was bitter cold winter. But let me tell you something about my relationship with my brothers and some of my early memories. One of my earliest memory is sitting with Abe on a mattress that was turned over to air, and I was sucking on a hanger. I was 3 years old. I do remember, or maybe younger. Was that about right? I think I was about 3.
You couldn't have been much younger than
Somehow that hanger got stuck down in here. Abe tells me he probably stuck it down in there, and the way he treated me, he's probably correct. Anyway, I screamed, and my mother came and pulled it out. But in pulling it out, she tore my skin, and I remember I had stitches here, and I have a little scar to prove it.
Not perfect.
And that was only one of the scars that I have from my dear brother Abe. I remember once he hit me in the head with a chain, a bicycle chain. And I think I have some stitches up here someplace from that.
Well, you must have done something awfully bad to deserve that.
Whatever.
She
I know
would
that
do
we
it unless
used-
she deserved it.
We used to fight terribly, and Benny used to protect me all the time.
And I used to come in and break up the fight with
The
me.
voice you
Well, that
hear,
was
the
before.
voice you hear in
That
the
was before you came
background
into this.
is Ray, Abe's wife, who was one of my very best friends when she was Abe's girlfriend at age 11 or 12. and we all ran around in the same crowd. Would you like to tell them about our house on 6th Street and what used to go on there when our mother and father were away at the restaurant every Sunday afternoon?
Well, our house was the meeting place.
Because there were no
This is
adults.
We're skipping several years now.
We're jumping around.
We're
quite a
jumping.
bit.
We're jumping up really to the teens really. We all had a group of friends. She had her group of friends.
We were in the same group.
No, it
yeah.
was all one group, but
Yeah.
you know, but our house was the meeting place
On Sunday.
for everybody. I mean, it just everybody felt comfortable in our house,
Because there were no
And they-
grown-ups around.
and everybody met there. Everybody ate. You think, we had all this stuff in the refrigerator? Whatever was there, everybody ate from our
Couldn't have
refrigerator.
been too much.
There wasn't too much. That's what I'm saying.
Well, we always had plenty of
But there was
food.
always
Food
food.
was never a
There was
First
always
of all,
food.
It wasn't a refrigerator, it was an ice box.
It was an ice box. It was an ice box.
Was
It was
an
not a
ice- It
refrigerator.
was a nice box.
Iceman,
remember.
I think it's important. An iceman would come by, a truck would come with ice on it. The man would yell out, ice, and you'd yell down to him how much you wanted. You say 10 cents worth of ice, 15 cents. You'd yell down.
The Iceman was always a hunchback.
And he would,
With a hiker.
and what he
Really?
would do,
I don't remember that.
what he would do, according to how much you told me you wanted, he would chop with an ice pick. He'd have a rubber mat over his shoulder, and he would take his tongs. Otherwise, how would they know?
I don't remember.
He would take the tongs and pick up the piece of ice that you told him, the 10-cent piece or the 15-cent piece or the 20-cent piece. I don't remember we ever ordered a 20-cent piece. I never remember ordering a 20-cent piece. That was too big. That was too big. And he would take it with the tongue and throw it on the rubber thing that he had on his shoulder. And we had an elevator, so he could take the elevator. But we were in houses that didn't have elevators. And he went in houses that didn't have elevators. And he would carry it up 3-4 flights to the apartment. You
Benny,
yell out,
Benny,
apartment
when
6.
we had an elevator, we had a refrigerator.
Yeah, right.
When we didn't have an elevator and lived
Then
on the
he
4th
carried
and
it-
5th floor,
then
we
he
didn't.
carried-
We had an ice box.
Well, that's when he carried it up.
Right.
But what about what went on in that with the boys and girls?
Well, the boys and girls, that was later on. Basically, that was when we lived on 6th Street.
That's what I thought.
and
That's what
2nd
I was
Avenue.
talking.
We were much older, and at that point, we were already high school students.
Yeah, junior high. No.
And we were. We had already had all our sex education classes.
Let's go back earlier because we're going too far ahead. Let's go back earlier.
Early.
During the Depression, which would be in the early 30s, let's say 1932, 1933.
I wasn't born yet.
You weren't born yet.
1930. She was born in 1930.
Right.
Bonnie,
Yes.
you be careful who you show this tape to. When I'm dead, you can show it to anybody. But when I'm alive and telling men that I'm younger than I am, don't show this to anybody.
During those years, some of those years, we used to go down and they used to give out food, free food. And Abe and I used to go down to pick up, do you remember that, Abe?
I
Going down
remember.
to
Well,
pick-
you're talking about the home relief.
Yeah,
You're talking about home relief. We actually had we got special coupons.
we used to go down and pick up bags of
Potatoes,
Flour.
flour, butter.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
used to go down and pick up
Vague memories of it.
various staples. We used to pick up, staples. At the same time, around that same time, I was about 8, 9. Abe would have been about 6 or 7. We were taking
I wasn't born
violin.
yet.
We were taking violin lessons.
Well, the reason we
We're
took
taking
violin,
violin
the reasons
lessons.
we did take violin lessons, we had one of our relatives, Bronislaw Huberman, who was a world-renowned violinist.
Still is.
We had well, he's dead now.
I know, but I mean, he's still a
Matter of
famous
fact,
name.
well, those that are familiar with Israel, of course, know that there is a Huberman Street, which is named after Bronislaw Huberman. And we had another relative who was a violin, not only a concert violinist, but also a violin teacher. And there was always hope that there was another Bronislaw Huberman in the family. So, and they were hoping that it was either Benny or myself. So we were forced to take violin lessons, and
We had one violin for the two
for
of
the
us.
two of us. And of course, I always tell the story that the day that our mother took the violin away from us is when she found we were carrying a machine gun in the case.
Which wasn't true.
No, but
But it was
it
hard.
makes a good
It was
story.
hard to play the violin if you carried the bow and if you carried the
Well, let me tell you what I remember.
He was more talented.
Can I tell you what I remember about those violin lessons?
Well, you don't
Which-
forget, more talented, you know, more than what, so.
Yeah, right. I mean,
I want to
it
tell you
just
what
meant that
I
I was worse than he
remember
was.
about those violin lessons, which
So
they
you were
don't
less talented, that's
they
all.
don't remember this story, but I remember it. My mother would give them a quarter. They used to take group lessons at the Christadora house.
yes, a quarter paid for both of us.
Christadora
A
with
quarter
one
paid for
violin.
both of us.
Group lessons with one violin.
Right.
Not only for us, but for the rest of the group.
Wait a minute now.
That was a lot. Wait, I want you to know that a quarter was a lot of money.
Yes.
Okay.
A quarter.
My
Quarter was a-
mother,
that was a
my,
big-
my
big
mother had great
sacrifice.
aspirations for
That was
her
a big
children.
sacrifice.
I'll tell you what she did with me after I tell you the story about them with their music lessons. Well, they used to take the quarter and they would go to the park and play ball and spend the quarter on God knows what. At least often.
Broads.
Okay. I
We
remember
were 8, 9 years old.
one day, one of them lost a sweater. And they were very upset that my mother would be very angry. We didn't have much money,
Abe
and
lost
to lose a sweater was a very big deal.
All of a
So-
sudden, he's got a good memory. Abe, he lost it.
No. The reason I'll tell you why I remember it.
Finish your story.
Because it was brown, and that was my color.
No. No.
Can I finish the
Go ahead.
story?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Anyway, so they concocted a scheme. I'm sure it was your idea.
No, I know what happened. That's why I remember he lost it.
All right,
'Cause
so
I came
you tell
home-
it your way.
I
Okay.
came home without him.
Right.
And I said to my mother, I said, something terrible happened.
I lost my
She
friend.
didn't see him,
Oh,
and she thought something happened to him.
what happened
She
to
got-
Amy?
She got so frightened, which was my whole purpose. Shows you the old mind working. That by the time I told her that nothing had happened to him, it was just that he lost his sweater, she was so relieved that it was only the sweater that she
wasn't
didn't get
that-
as mad as she would have been if we had both walked in and we said we lost the sweater.
Okay, now let me tell
That's
you
why I
about.
remember it was
I
his
have-
sweater.
If you
Because
think,
I was the one who did the dirty work.
if
If it had been my sweater, I would have sent him in to tell the story.
if you think group lessons with one violin is funny, my mother's aspirations for the musical education of her children extended to me taking piano lessons, and we had no piano
At all.
at all.
I remember.
So my mother had a cardboard. It was a cardboard keyboard. But I used to go to my friend Claire's house to practice. They had a piano. But in between, I couldn't always go to a friend's house. In between, I had to practice on a cardboard.
Practice your fingering on a
cardboard.
cardboard keyboard.
How do you know if it's right?
You still can practice.
That's the reason I'm such a great pianist today.
Cardboard pianos. And they only played a cardboard piano.
But it was interesting. Really, she wanted so much for us to be,
Always.
you know,
College
she didn't
or-
have any money. And if it wasn't for her, we would not have gone to
All
college.
four of us went to college.
Because my father was not keen on it. He thought we needed to go to work, especially me. A girl for sure didn't have to go to college. And
We
really,
didn't want any of us to go to college.
and it was my mother's pushing really
Well,
that
if
got
it
us
wasn't
all to
for the
go.
fact that, at least
GI
in our
Bill,
day and age,
too.
we were
Right.
able to go to free colleges where we didn't
Right.
have to pay.
Right.
But the point was that
But he
Papa
felt that
Papa
Tom was
felt
better
that she'd go
served
to work, not
to
to
go to work and bring
school.
money in.
Right. And I remember many's the fight they had over
Oh.
that. Many's the fight.
Well, they made Max quit.
Max never
Max
graduated
never graduated high school.
Well,
What
he
are you
quit
talking
at 15.
But they didn't make
about? Not because of
No,
that.
he-
That was Hawthorne, and then he
he-
went into the sun. No,
No.
no.
He just
They didn't
wasn't-
make him quit. Had nothing to do with that. No.
Okay,
Just,
what else?
Wasn't too
Our
crazy
memories,
about-
our
wasn't too
memories
crazy
are
about
very limited about Maxie anyhow
Yeah.
because he was almost not a part of
But
the
let's
family.
tell them a little bit about our parents. My father, our father, was a leather cutter. He made purses. He cut the leather for
Not
leather.
for purses.
Well, I
mostly
remember
for
purses.
jackets.
I remember
No,
purses.
There was a time that he was just doing it for purses.
No, the
Well,
purses
anyway,
he
it was-
did when he didn't have any work. He
No,
did that
that's right.
himself.
Purses
Purses he did for himself.
Very rarely did he do purses.
Okay, well, it was a leather cutter.
He was a leather
He
cutter
was a
for
leather-
clothing, for jackets and things. When he was doing the purses, he was doing that for himself when there was no work.
When there's no work, he used to go purses and try and sell them.
And
To try and sell them wallets.
Wallets.
I know what you-
But
Well,
that was
he
not.
probably,
But
his job was piecework, and it was
Seasonal. It was very
Seasonal.
seasonal.
He probably, because it was seasonal, because it was outerwear. He was making mostly winter jackets.
Okay.
That's what made it seasonal until the war came, and then he was doing defense work.
Anyway, because his work was seasonal, there were many periods where he was not working at all. And that,
Probably 50% of the year he was not working.
right.
so my
half of the
mother,
year.
my mother always worked. I always remember her working. I never remember a time when she didn't work. Huh?
Dora.
Dora Huberman.
His name was Nathan.
But one of the and so she, either she worked for someone or she had, I remember 1, 2, 3 restaurants. There were 2 in Harlem and 1 on Freeman Street in the Bronx. Did she ever have any others?
Only one in Harlem.
Freeman Street.
Freeman Street.
It was
Central
Freeman
Street
Street. I
Station.
remember.
Incidentally, her
it.
maiden name was Weissman.
Weissman.
The street station.
And we used to work there. But one of the things I remember, this is my own memory about myself, is my mother used to sew very well, and she always used to make mother and daughter clothes for me and her.
Let me go back
Well, it
to
was
something.
before you were in
wait,
my-
let me go back to
much
something that you
younger.
wouldn't remember.
Little girl.
Let me go back. You just mentioned something that I hadn't thought of in years, and you probably don't even know about this. You might vaguely, because you were a baby. During the Depression, people used to do work at home, contract work. She worked for a milliner, putting stuff on veils. She had cartons of veils. Do you remember this? She had cartons of veils at home.
You got to remember, Benny, I'm 12 years
No,
younger
that's
than you are.
right.
What I remember.
Exactly. That's why I mentioned this. That I didn't think. I knew you wouldn't remember at all.
She wasn't born yet.
No, I'm serious.
Well-
That's why I didn't think you would remember.
You're right.
She would sit all day long, and she'd have these bare veils, and put sequins on,
Sequins, that was so
and
popular.
all this other junk, appliques, whatever had to be put on, and sit all day long and just put these things on. And she's probably getting a penny a veil, or maybe less than that. I don't know what the pay was at that time. She might have been making 10 cents an hour for all I know.
You know,
I have
you're
no
talking-
idea what the pay was.
Talking about bad times when we were
But
kids.
I had not thought of that in 50 years, probably,
Terrific.
until just a second when she mentioned.
Uh,
Yeah, I didn't know that. So
I don't recall that, but you're talking about.
And I remember it.
You're talking about the slow times and the few remembrances I have of Maxie, and they were vague. I do remember Max used to work when he was living at home. This was probably before Hawthorne. He used to work in luncheonettes and restaurants, and we used to look forward to him coming home at night
I remember that.
because he would bring home the cake that was left over from that day because they couldn't sell it the next day, and he would be able to bring it home. And we used to stay up waiting to see because
Step till 12 o'clock for him
these
to
were
come home.
treats that we were not used to getting. I mean, we couldn't afford to go out and buy these.
Big treats.
And now that I think back about on it, I'm just wondering whether they actually gave it to Max or whether he was stealing it. It's quite possible. Now we think we're gonna have to ask him.
I don't think he was stealing. I
But
really don't.
It was day old. And the
I
other
really
thing I
don't.
remember, and I guess I couldn't have been at most 5 years old. Maybe 6. Maxie, in order to earn some income, used to sell newspapers in the evenings. And
Good story.
he'd pick up the newspapers and sold them, wherever he could. But he'd walk into bars and try and sell newspapers. And a couple of nights he took me along with him, and I would carry the papers until it got to a point where here I was, this cute little 5 or 6 year old, and we'd walk into a bar. And we'd both have newspapers. And when Max would go to try and sell a newspaper, they'd say, "Not you, we want the kid," as though we were doing, we were separate people, separate businesses. That's one of the too few remembrances. You know, there are very few remembrances.
Let me add to that
of
story.
Uncle Max.
Let me add to that story.
Uncle Max. He
Uncle
wasn't your
Max.
Uncle Max.
Well, his not. Their Uncle Max.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what I mean.
The children's
Let
Uncle
me let me add to that story. First of all, my brother Abe was the cutest kid you ever saw. I mean, he was
He
a
still
doll.
Max. He
am.
was.
Yeah, he was a
really-
doll.
He was handsome.
He was a doll. The minute Max took him with him, when he started taking him with him, I was telling the papers, because I remember, the minute he took him, his income doubled, because he told him, he says, when they ask for change, tell them you don't have any change.
Oh yeah.
Right? I remember this.
Well,
He says,
at that time, the newspaper,
was
talking
2
about the
cents.
Daily News, was
It
2 cents.
So if they give you a nickel, tell them you don't have any change. Then if they insist on having change, you call me, I'll give them change. If they insist on it, a lot of people didn't insist. When he said, I don't have change, they said, all right, keep it. So on a 2-cent paper, they would make 3 cents in a tip. It was a
Not bad.
fortune. A couple of nights, Max took me. They didn't give a damn about me. He had no success
You were
with me.
a cute kid too.
He had no success. He took me out 2-3 nights. He dumped me right away, Max. He had no regard for me at all. Max was about 13 then.
He
As
was
I said, at
handsome,
13 he was almost 6 feet tall, Max. At 13, so he was a big kid.
I think
But
you
he
were
had no-
I think you were so short
he
that
had
he
no
only
com-
looked like he was
he had
6
no
feet.
compassion.
He wasn't 6 feet at 13, Benny.
5'10".
Oh, he was tall. Though.
You
He-
take a look at his bar mitzvah picture. Take a look at Max's bar mitzvah picture.
It's up to here. You can't
What's the
really
matter
You
with
see
tell.
how tall he is.
All right, what's the difference?
Anyway.
Come on.
He was pretty big.
It's good for the day.
It's good.
Max at 13 was bigger than you are now.
Can I tell them a story about
Anyway,
Abe and
no
his good
way.
looks?
Anyway, wait a minute. Let me finish the story. Max had no
Imagination now is running away.
Max had no compassion. He took me out 2-3 nights. He dumped me. He says, forget it. You're not who I want.
It wasn't a question of compassion.
No, it was more
Benny.
money.
It was a question of finances.
But what I'm saying is, he didn't treat me too good. I mean,
Well-
he wasn't too tactful about it. He says, listen, kid, you ain't got it. He's got it. You know.
Do you remember the Little Sister contest at the boys' club you took me to? Oh, I think there was a Little Sister contest at the boys' club. And every boy who had a little sister, it was like a beauty contest, Little Sister. Abe took me, and the brother had to go with the little sister before the judges, and they gave prizes for different things. I think I was probably about 6, and you must have been 8. Maybe I was 7, and you were 9, young. And I won a ribbon.
Who
for,
forced me to take you?
I was sort of cute. when
I
was
know, but
little.
why would I do
Anyway.
that? I didn't even like you then.
I know you didn't. Anyway, well, let me finish the story, and I'll tell you. I won a ribbon for having the nicest smile. I got the nicest smile. You don't. And this son of a gun, we came home. I was so happy. He said, huh, they didn't give it to you because of you. They saw me standing behind you, and they liked what they saw, so they gave you a prize.
Probably
I'll
true.
never forget that. I felt so bad. I was just a little girl, and I really believed him that was really why I won the contest. I felt so bad because I was so happy that I won. You know, I didn't.
She still feels bad about it.
Oh, gee. And about Max, I remember we talk about our mother. She really knocked herself out. There were programs to send children to the country every summer, away. A week at camp, a week here,
Get them out of the city.
just to get them out of the hot city. I remember Max. He went, she'd run around to find places to send. I just remember his story. I remember going myself to different places. But I remember once he came home from camp, one day, the next day she had him signed up for another camp, and he said, she won't let me live.
Oh, talk about
Because he didn't even, she won't let me live. He
talk
didn't
about-
want to go. He didn't even have a day at home.
talk about the camp programs. It was a question whether the Democratic Club would send us away or wherever. Matter of fact,
place that
Mom
had a
went
free
with us.
camp.
You remember when we
St.
went?
John the
St.
Divine.
John the Divine.
It was all
There was a
black.
nice Jew. No, it wasn't
No,
all
it wasn't black. It was all Catholic.
But it wasn't. It was here with nice Jewish
all
family.
Catholic.
She must have got that from the
I was
Stuyvesant
thinking
house.
Father Divine.
One of the
No, it was St. John the Divine. It was a
one of the
Catholic camp.
social settlement houses, whatever it was not
A settlement
wasn't a
house.
Jewish settlement house. Evidently had a camp program. And a matter of fact, Mom was with us at that camp one year, I think.
Yeah.
Anyhow, here we were, a nice Jewish family. Were you there? Ben, you
I
were
was there.
Were you there with us, Peggy?
You had to kneel down and, pray
every morning we had to go to
there, I
church.
must
Every
have been
morning,
there.
every
Every
night.
morning,
Leave
and
me
every,
alone.
twice a
Every
day we
morning,
had to go
every
to
night.
church.
We had to go to church.
I don't remember.
She didn't care as long as it got you out of the city.
And they fed us and,
And
you know,
they fed us and
housed us.
oh,
And do you remember there was a program called, well, I don't know, it's like Friendly Town, it's called now, where a family in the country would take a city child
Sure,
for a
I
week.
went to. I
went to a farm.
Gloversville. You remember we went to Glover?
You
and
two
I
went.
went
Yes,
to.
we went to
You two
Gloversville.
went to Gloversville.
And then one year I went to Hartford, Connecticut. I stayed with a family in Hartford, Connecticut.
But I went to one, Aunt Ray, her name was. They liked me so much I went 3 years in a row until she died. Because they always asked for me. Every year they wanted me to come back.
It wasn't Aunt Jemima.
It's on a farm. Oh, they had a farm.
these
But-
programs were fantastic because we were city kids. And the only time we ever got out of the city was that she went looking for any group that would take kids away from the city for a week, for 2 weeks. And like with Max, if she found two of them, if one started the next day after one was finished, but it got us out of the city during the summer. I went to
yeah.
Princeton camp 3 years in a row. Princeton University had a camp.
Who sent us there? I went there too.
I went there 3 years in a row. I learned to swim from the intercollegiate swimming champion. Taught me how to swim up at the camp. I learned to box from a boxing guy that was on the boxing team at
Is that where
Princeton.
you started your athletic,
No, whatever
it's enough, it's
it
enough.
was.
Rob?
I
It's
learned at
enough.
Princeton.
Yeah, Benny, they're cutting
I'm
it.
tired.
I went to a farm.
Cut that
I'd never
part
been to a
out.
farm in my life. I'd never been to a farm in my life. I went for a week at a farm. It was fantastic.
All right,
They took
stop
3
it.
of us,
All right.
3 to a farm,
All right,
3
cut.
boys.
Continue
That's
next.
enough. It's
Continue
late. I'm
tomorrow.
really tired. To be continued.
This could
And
go
these
on
are very
for
early
several
recollections.
Yeah, I'm tired. It's
So, I
enough.
mean, this whole, I'm falling asleep.